Okay, hey everyone, can you guys hear me? I just wanted to preset a few things. So this is crazy that they literally held our exact ranges and then pushed it to our calculated spots. Like this is honestly insane, especially the fact that they did this on the 28th. Like this is wild. But I already went over everything a whole bunch, but we can go over it one last time. Last night's conditions, I had mentioned like closing around 71.32. This is okay. This is what's giving us better odds than the 71.20s did the days prior, okay? I'm not going to re-explain why those areas were calculated. I already did like probably 7 times now, so we won't really discuss that. But the 7-1, 2-2, 2-5, 3-2, 4-4, these are really calculated areas, as are the 6-1. 6-2, 6-3, 6-4, this range in here, okay? And breaking 6-6 is essentially what would give us like better structure breaks. So, and then obviously getting back over 7-6, 7-9, 8-1, 8-3, 8-8 to 9-3. Okay. For constructive price action to occur, we really wanted to try holding our channel, so around 71.34. 71.36. I'm going to mark the 71.38 spot on here. I'm going to mark the 71.46.75 because this was a calculated area just to kind of show you guys. So some of the odds that really helped this week is obviously the core hold yesterday above 70.79. And then mainly the opening range. So where they opened this today, this automatically, are you guys listening, gave us an odd of getting at least that 10. Remember how I said it earlier this week. Remember how I said that we basically lost 7.5 to 9 points? I said it earlier in the week, and I said it again on, I think, yesterday's session. Do you guys remember this? Okay, so we had that reduction, and that was mainly due to the 71.28 backtest versus 3.6. Okay, that played it. Here, I'm just going to copy paste all this. That is what played a huge role, okay, in terms of getting those bigger breaks. What else? The other thing that played a huge role was the 71.20s versus 71.40s, okay? And I've said this quite a lot of times that like those are not bad areas to pin, but it would have been better had they closed maybe closer to that 71.40, 44, okay? Here you go. I'm literally just pasting everything I've said throughout the week, okay? So, do you see where the offset's occurring now? Do you guys see that? So now this is putting us at a better odd to make up that 7.5 to 10 point differential in range, correct? Everyone's on the same page before I move forward? You're all aware of where this came in from, and I already sent you the exact calculation, so you should know why these areas are calculated. I'm not going to go over it again because I did, and I went over it in like extreme detail last night, which is right in here. Okay, if you want to go over it yourselves, you can. It's this. It's just going to be pretty hard to cover, but anyway. Okay, so this is what I covered in Substack. Okay, so where do we start to progress? And it's very, 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 very obvious. Where do we start finally progressing? When you get what? These are the medians, okay? Okay, and then off the close. If we apply all of this logic here, I know for a fact, and I said this morning, that this area is the first overhead for overnight. Okay. And I know for a fact that if they start clearing there and opening there and closing there, that is what you will get a 71.88 to 93 retest, okay? 7144 is linked to what? Don't get this wrong. What is 718893 linked to? What's that area correlated to? What's that spot correlated to? How do I know that we were gonna potentially get that? There's a lot of things that played out, but how could we have been so certain that they were gonna trigger 7188 to 7193? What is that area linked to? Yes, the 7144. Do you guys see where they held in real time today? It's insane. Look at what they did. So look at the 7.5 point offset that we finally made up. Okay, and this, basically you can take the 7.5 points, you guys, and you can apply it off the highs, okay? So like here. So I know 7180 roughly, okay, that's gonna be the first overhead. Versus that 10.5, okay? I'm just showing you guys this. And this is kind of hard to see right here, but 10.5, I think is like right around here. And from this range in here, should be right around here. And from our weekly ranges from the day before, I think it's around the 8.3 mark. Okay. So the first big spot with the 7.5 range from the weekly highs, okay, from Tuesday, off the 7183 would be 7190. Okay, this is the half point range. Off 7185, it would have been closer to the 9.3 spot. Okay. And then off here with the range differential that we're making up, because we finally opened and closed at the proper spots. Okay, which are what? What are the proper spots that they opened and closed at? That gave us this probability. What are they? And this is just the first odd. I'm just showing you guys this. Okay. The 7132, that automatically gave us that 7.5 to 10.5 point offset. Okay. So overnight conditions, let's take a look from our spots. First and foremost, we held our weekly core targets of 70, 79, 70, 81. Okay. These were my downside targets for the week. These areas here. We held above, closed, retraced back. Do you see where they held? 71.22, 71.25. These areas did a great job of pinning. Like, look at how pinnable this is when you're looking at it. This is insanely pinnable, okay? And you guys can see it just even by like glancing at this. Some of the mid ranges that you could have also marked are like the 7143 to 44 area, and the mid-range between that and let's say 7166 roughly, okay? That should be around like your 50s, so like your 51, 54. Okay, so based on where they closed, okay, around that 7132.50 mark, and our first overhead, okay, which is that 71, I think 61.75. Your mid-range is around 47, 51, 54, okay, when we're looking at it from basically these median points from here, okay? These areas here. Do you see what I'm saying? Specifically off of 44, which is our spot. You could use the actual area that they opened if you want, okay? I'm just showing you the mid-range. Okay, and specifically off like that 60. What was the first area? Off 3-2 is 5775. 5775. So roughly this area in here, okay? Because these are the first big spots. Is this area here? What's the next spot? 59. And these areas here, okay? So if we're measuring off our ranges, so 7144, but we're going to use the actual 7143 that occurred, okay? I would know that my conditions are to do the following. 1, you have to hold 7122, 32, okay? These are your conditions. And has to hold. 2, right? Ideally open above 7138, close to 7143, 7144, 7146, okay? 3, retest 7158 to 7161, 7163, 7164 area, okay? Do you see this? Look at where they kept stalling overnight. They hit the first target. Okay, there. Okay, 7161 triggered. So if 7161 triggered, I know for a fact that that's linked to what? What is 7161 correlated to? From what I discussed last night. And specifically off these structured open lows. Okay, these are the medians. Okay. So, what conditions do you have to set now for you to retest 7180s? What do you have to do? You cannot not do this, basically. What condition do you have to meet? There's a few. So 1, okay, you came back. You back tested 7134. You'd never breached below 3.2. And I'll show you guys this. Okay, this is crucial. This was a really good structural hold. Okay. Where else do you have to do this? Where else do you want to start holding once you come back and make the clearance break? This is where the clearance break occurred, you guys, in pre-market, by the way. When they came back tested, you can see here. You see how they tested 5.9, 5.7 right here? Look, those are our calculated spots. They came back. They tried their best to hold around that 3.8 for 140 once it cleared. Do you see this? Look at the 50% clearance right here. And look at the single sticks above 5.7, 5.9, directly to 7.1. It took out 7.164, 6.1, 6.3, 6.6, 7.1 in a single stick, directly to the 7.4 spot. 7.475 is what breaks structure, correct? We've said that a few times. Structure to 7.188, okay? What area would have to hold at that point? So we knew that we had to hold above here. Which area has to hold next? You cannot come beneath this range at this point. And this was the same case scenario with the 20s. Okay, so like right around this range in here when they started holding the line. You can see it. Okay, and off our 7120, which I don't have marked, but what do you have to do? If I'm gonna stream you guys in real time and take away from my positions, you guys better at least try to participate, because then otherwise I'll just shut off the stream and I'll go back to trading. I won't go over this. What's your next condition? So 7122, 7132, you have to start holding above what? Which area is linked to the 80s? Obviously 7144. What do you want to do in real time? This right here, testing 7188 in pre-market. Okay, and this structure break right here, this assured me that we likely could get that retest under one circumstance. What's that circumstance? There's one condition. It has to be set. We would have never gotten a break of 7188 and 93 if they didn't do this in real time. What has to hold? And this is so, so, so important. This was such a clean trade, you guys. You have to hold the 4446. Sreezer, you should know this. You should know this. Of all people, you should be the one that knows this. Okay? You cannot come beneath this range in here. That is what links it. That would have then recycled you back probably to the 71, 32, 22, made it pinnable for the week. Do you get what I'm saying? This test here prevented a retest of these ranges in here, okay? Getting 7188 protected us. What do you mean why though? Read. What do you mean why? Did you read anything I wrote? Did you read the report? How? What do you mean why? Because off weekly open. Your weekly open is linked to highs. Okay, so read this. Read this 10,000 times until it clicks. Okay? Read the report again and again and again and again because it's a calculated range. Because that's your median between your weekly opening, which is around the 7,100, which is a neutral spot. If you don't hold that or tag A8, you're going to go back to 7,100. I don't know how else to explain that. I'm showing you from a math perspective, from a range perspective, like from a calculated perspective, okay, from a weekly opening perspective, a weekly high perspective. How else can I explain that, you guys? Which area triggers volatility? Taking us back to what? Which area resets us all over again? And then you can come back to 70, 80. Obviously going back to this area here, okay? That area, okay? Breaking this area here on a failure, okay? This is how you have to understand structure. On a failure of 7166, that would trigger 7100s. Do you understand what I'm saying? Testing 8889 though wouldn't have done that. So I'm trying to show you guys what would have happened if we didn't hold 7144, okay? It wouldn't have triggered a big short. It would have made it pinnable. Do you get what I'm saying? Had they filled this morning, but they tested this, okay? If you're testing here, but then stalling here, it offsets the volatility risk. Does that make sense? Because you met this and you met this. Okay, what would they have done at that point if they didn't fail, or if they failed 7144 this area? Imagine they failed that. Okay, you have to understand structure and price and how it's correlated. Okay, had this been the case, then it would have been recycled back to these ranges. Do you get what I'm saying? Then you would have had a higher likelihood of probably pinning in these areas here, which only does one thing. It resets your weekly open. Remember how we had odds of opening the weekly around 7120, 7122, 32, 44? Okay, had they done that, it probably would have kept it stuck in this range in here. Okay, with a tiny, tiny, tiny probability of resetting the weekly close back to here. That would have been your scenario. I can assure that 1001%. Okay, had they stalled here, okay, let's say here overnight, here, okay, and they didn't get a break above here, okay, in real time, this could have triggered your 4-4 break, okay, that could have triggered you back to square one, okay, back to this area here. That would have ended up pinning the close flat. Do you get what I'm saying? It's not just about a higher high, it's about a calculated high. Because that's not true. You could have triggered 7186 and it wouldn't have been high enough. Do you get what I'm saying? It's not just about a higher high. That's not true. It's about a calculated high. Okay? Which is why technically opening at 7144 is actually technically more bullish than opening at 7161. Opening higher doesn't necessarily equate to a better move. It's where it's a calculated spot. Does that make sense? I know this is extremely advanced way of trading, but it's like I am telling you guys why these areas are calculated and how your odds would play out. So we know for a fact that your 7144 has to be the condition that holds. Everyone's in agreement there? That has to be the spot that holds. Okay? Especially on a 7188 break overnight. This is what's going to give us the highest odds, okay, of getting back here. What would have happened if they triggered 7188, okay, but failed 44? What would your odds have been then if you failed 4446 here, but then you did test 7188 in pre-market? Your odds then, I would say, you're probably going to be channel bound. Okay, 3344. Okay, maybe have some odds of pinning either right in the channel or maybe resetting those weekly pins. Maybe you could pin at 6-4, 6-5, 6-6. Maybe you progress, you get a better pin this time at 6-8, 7-1. Does that make sense? You guys, I want you guys to understand it from like a probability perspective too, because I think it's just as important. What you could do is take the 17-point differential, okay, or whatever the differential is in range. You can just go with 17 to 22 points off like a, let's say a 7-5 stall or something, okay? Let's say that they didn't get that full break and they broke 4-4. Okay, you could basically assume these would be like max downside ranges, okay, and this would be where they potentially pin the close on a 4-4-4-3 failure. We could use 4-3 since that's technically where we open the session today, and that would just repin you flat on the week. Does that make sense, you guys? I want you to understand probabilities, because I think you guys really struggle with that and understanding how certain scenarios can play out. Okay, that would have been, no, it wouldn't have reversed down. Okay, pay attention. You reverse down if you didn't trigger the 60s 7-1 7-4 breaks, okay, and then you failed 4-4, that triggers you down. Okay, does that make sense? That is the 7100 7160s stuck scenario. Okay, the most bearish scenario would have been where we closed already gave us an advantage. Them closing it at 3-2 and opening at 4-3 already gave us an advantage, right? It was just about the retest. Had they stalled here last night, okay, and then immediately failed 3-8, 3-2, do you get what I'm saying? And took it back to here, okay, and then came back and let's say stalled the 60s, that is bearish, okay? This is what would have then triggered, let's say they opened the market around the 40s. Okay, this could then trigger the 71.06 retest. Okay, that can then trigger potentially coming back to lows. That was a very low probability based on where they opened and closed. Is everyone on the same page? So we clearly did a great job of holding our 71.44 and 46 in real time today. Where we opened wasn't the best open, but it was enough to give us an odd, okay? So first calculated area was around that 5-1 spot that we talked about in 5-2. You can see that they tried holding that, okay? Came back, and then you see the little slight stall. They held exactly 7-1-4-5. So they held above 4-4, correct? And roughly the same 2 points that they've been holding above 3-4, 3-3, okay? They closed yesterday at 3-250. The channel was around 3-3-3-4. But just to give you guys an idea. Okay. And then where's the 4-3? Okay, do you see that? This is where you'd want to hold. So then what's your next conditions? You obviously want to come back and clear the 61, 63, 64. Okay, you see how they stalled a tiny bit at 7. This is where they were accumulating. This is accumulation and distribution right here. And right at our 7-4-7-6 spot. Which area triggers bulls? Don't get this wrong either. Which area triggers bulls? This is in the report, and I've said it a gazillion times. I put it in the pre-market analysis this morning too. Which area then triggers bulls to keep 71.88 odds in play? What's that area that triggers bulls? Exactly right there, right? What area triggers bulls? to get that continued price action. You guys, I haven't looked at my positions in like 20 minutes, so you better be paying attention because I have open positions. Obviously 7-4, 7-6, okay? That area is going to be what triggers bulls. What were bulls doing here? They're trying so hard to hold above 7-1. Okay, they tested 7-6. Okay, this is, do you see how this is perfect price behavior to basically get that single stick to 8-8, 9-1, 9-3? And pay attention where I drew those calculated offsets that we had of 7.5 and 10.5 points. Do you see that? Look at this clearance. This is insane. This is exactly those 7.5 and 10.5 point intervals, okay? The only interval that we haven't measured yet is what? That's why it's stuck right here. What intervals have we not measured yet? So that was measured off of the differential between 3-2 and 2-2 and 2-5. Which differential have we not measured yet? And this is what you guys are going to do. Which differential have I not measured yet to give me an idea of what potentially could be the max ranges for the session? Or extremely calculated ranges if they come and finally clear this area here. Off what? And this is the most important spot. This is what got us here in the first place. What area is that? So we're going back to the daily. I measured these specifically off of the differential between our, and the only reason I did this, guys, it's not because this is the open and close. It's because these are calculated open and close ratios, okay? If this wasn't calculated, I wouldn't care to measure that. Does that make sense? But 22, 25, 32, 44 are calculated. I care to measure that. Same with the 6-1, 7-3, 8-3 stalls. So which differential have we yet to measure? I already had a long from yesterday, but I ended up doing a long for Monday when they came back over that 71.50. I think I got filled at 71.53. But I had some longs from yesterday off our 70-80 holds. And then again when they held 71.20s. Okay. Let's take a look. 20.75, right? The differentials now are going to be off 71.43, 71.44. Correct? Could you also take the differentials off real-time lows? 71.45. Yes, you can. Okay. Are these going to give us potentially our max ranges for the week? And I can suffice that this is extremely calculated, so I know for a fact that these are going to be the spots. You guys are even better. And better than those subscribed to the Substack. So I know it's not me that's the issue. You guys clearly are not paying attention. I want you guys to give me the last areas for the session. What would those areas be? And then I'll get back to my own trading. I'm not going to trade the whole session today, or stream the whole session. I want to manage my own trades. What would those areas be? Momo, you're banned for, like, reasoning, though. Come on. What would these final areas be? It's going to be the differentials between what? Our final range differentials are going to be off of our 71.43. We can obviously use the 3.5 if you want. Okay, and we can also use our 4.4 and the 4.5 real-time lows. Okay, these are going to be likely the final areas for the session this week. And I'm only using these once again because they are calculated spots. If they weren't calculated spots, I wouldn't care. Okay, so for starters, you could have 13.15, 13.25. Okay, that's also the 10.50. You could have the 20.75, 18, and then let's just do this off 4.5 just because it's the real-time lows. Okay, 20 points. So max range is probably off the 4.5 and 2.2, which is 22.75 points, which makes sense because roughly when you move in 17 22-point intervals. Okay, so where do we add these points to? What are we adding these to? Because these areas are linked with what? What are these linked to? Obviously back to our highs, right? So okay, so are these areas overheads? 71, 95, 75? Yes. Are these max weekly overheads? Yes. Okay, 71.93. Do this on your own. The 20.75 range. Can we say with certainty that there's a lot of overhead in this area here? Around 71.93, 95, 96. And I'm going over this because this is a big like area. And obviously now they can make this pinnable, especially into mid-session. Okay. And that's off the 8.1. 8.1 is obviously not weekly highs. Our weekly highs were 8.3. Okay, so 22.75 is 7205.75. Okay, 22.75 off our actual all-time highs is going to be, guess what? It's going to be our big target for the week, which was that 7208. That was my big weekly target. Hint, hint, it makes sense because I was already measuring off 71.44 way before this was ever the open for the 24th session. Okay, so I'm literally showing you guys how to predict open, close, highs, lows. Like, I'm trying to show you this, but you guys just have to pay really, really close attention, okay? So what were these mid-ranges? This is how they can now make it not choppy, but like this is how it could become a little bit conflicted in these neutral ranges. Does that make sense? On a clearance of 9.6, okay? So that's the 18 off that. I think the other midpoint was 20 or something like that, 20.75. 20 points from here is here. 20.75 is here. Okay. And you can apply them to like all the ranges if you want. Like if you want to apply it off the, I already applied it off the 7.3, but I'm saying if you want to apply it off the 8.3 and off the 8.1, like it's totally up to you. Off of 8.1 and 7.3, like this area is going to be pretty heavy. Okay, off of the 8.1 area. It should be around these areas here, like the 9.4, 9.5, 9.6. 22.50. Okay, those are the 95 areas. Okay. The 18-point range I think is going to be around Okay. Are those my max ranges for the week? Is my weekly report correct in what I said on Tuesday? Could I confidently say that the big overhead that you have to clear to get 7200s is 71.95.75? Yes. Okay, do you understand how calculated this is? Okay? What would you have to hold for that to be the case? So we can mark these if you guys want. I obviously didn't mark all these, but we can mark them because I know for a fact that these are definitely the final ranges for the week. There's nothing unless they expand. If they expand, then we would take it off our pre-market highs. Does that make sense? If they expand, we would take it off our pre-market highs to link session highs. Okay? Can you guys do that for me? Can you guys send me the levels for our pre-market ranges that would equate to final max targets for the week? Do that on your own. And then come back and tell me what they are while I mark these. You guys go and do that on your own, and then I'll mark these. And then I'm going to ask you guys for my price targets. I don't know what they are. I don't know what my targets are. I'm not prepared. I need you guys to send them to me. That's what you calculated? I know that that's not right. So that's not the calculated range. So I know that's wrong. Off the pre-market highs, calculate exactly what I just did here. Yeah, okay. Now do you guys see why those are the max weekly ranges? And I calculated those on Sunday, you guys, before these were ever the open, close, highs, lows, because I knew that the structural calculated price points are around these areas here, okay? Specifically if we hold 70, 78, 70, 81. Because that means that we're not coming back to 70, 50, 56, 57. Okay? These dates are linked to these dates. The 16th and 24th are correlated. Okay? The 24th and 28th are linked. Okay, so now looking at this. Are we prepared this afternoon for our targets here? I think so. Okay? What would the final targets be? They're going to be the exact same thing that we did except off pre-market. Okay, so which I think we stalled 8.9 or something like that. I think it was 8.9. I mean, you could do it off my 8.8 if you want, or 9.3, because like that's what I would have done on Sunday, because obviously I don't know exactly what price is going to hit, but we were pretty close, right? So an 8.9, I think off the report, 71.89.25 or something like that was the 232 point range, or 132 point range, if I'm not mistaken, off of my calculated intervals. Off here, I'm like 99% sure that was my 132. Yeah, it was like this area here. Isn't that insane? This area here was my 132 point interval. I have this on the report with the chart. This area, okay? This is the 132 point range off my base, which is that 70.57, 70.58. Okay? And they stalled exactly there. They broke it just slightly. So, can that put me at a 200? What does that mean, you guys? What does that mean? Actually, I'm not going to say it. If they triggered a 132 point range off those intervals, what does that mean? Potentially. It could mean that they could push us 256 points, right? What's 128 times 2? 132 times 2. This is when we start moving those intervals, okay? To get our final max ranges, and these are only expansion odds, so, and that would be if they push expand off 8-9, so we can just do this off 8-9-50. Someone in here sent them, but I'll just give you guys them. Okay, your first range would be, the max range would be here. Okay, around here. That secondary range would be around here, 72.10. And then like those median ranges are around here. Okay. Does that make sense based on where we open this week? You guys? That these could be like the median points? And then I think the last one was 20.75 or something, which is the 10, and then 20 was here. Okay, those are my max ranges for the week. I already planned this anyway earlier in the week. Why were these my max ranges though? Do you see it now? And why these are the max ranges? Okay, I'm showing you why they are. You're seeing it, okay? This was on Sunday's report too. This is the first major overhead. And now our open, close, highs, lows are telling us that that's exactly the case. Okay? Why could that be the case though? Why would they have, what could have also helped us predict that? Let's just assume that they give us these targets, guys, okay? We obviously could just pin here into the close. Why could these areas potentially be the price points? Based on what? There's something very specific that happened this week that it leans these odds there. And I mentioned it yesterday. I don't know who's paying attention, but I did mention it yesterday. What is that one thing that is probably leaning there? What do you guys think? Now I'm just going to delete all of these, and I'm going to send this final chart because these are my max ranges for the week. Okay. What's the one thing that happened early in the week that basically gave us a pretty big hint that they could take us here and that these might be some max ranges? And I did mention it. I mentioned it yesterday and I mentioned it the day before. What were those areas? What is it based off of? Why did I think that that could be the case? Something very, very, very specific. And very easy, actually. But, I don't know. I feel like sometimes you guys overthink it. Which is probably my fault, but... Okay. Well, what's the one big, big, big factor? No, there's something specific. So if neutral ranges are our max targets, why could that be a probability? Even if you didn't know any of this math, okay, I get asked this a lot, Izzy, your trading style is so confusing and so complicated and too advanced. How can I trade this Yeah, I'm not. You guys don't have to do this, okay? I want exact ranges. I want perfection. Not everyone has to do that. I'm not telling you to come and replicate this every single day and calculate the exact highs, exact lows, open, close. Okay, I'm not telling you to do that. Okay, I'm telling you, how could you do this based on what? Which base theory could you do this on? That could give you a pretty good idea on where they could take it to. Where did we open the week? If they stalled and failed that range, they're not going to want to pin 71.44, I don't think, because they already took out these mid ranges of. If had they not taken out 88.993, okay, yes, but they did. So in that case, they would make it pinnable around last week's close, like 71.60s, 70s. Does that make sense? Maybe the 50s, but I don't think that that's the case anyway. Yes, the open of this week was a neutral zone, correct? Yes? Would it make sense that they might max the week in a neutral zone? Just using base theory. This is, you're coming into this, you know absolutely nothing about the market. All you know is color theory, okay? You open the week in here, could you end the week here? Could this be your max range? Okay, you know absolutely nothing about the index or ranges or ratios or nothing, okay? You could just blindly use this. Do you see what I'm saying? The theory I made up is based off math, okay? I obviously am not starting my zone at 1,000 or 100, okay? It's starting at 8 for a reason. I did this. It's a very calculated format, okay? So now when you're looking at this, you're like, oh, that makes total sense. Okay, yeah, but now I just showed you why the open, close, highs, lows, overnight action, real-time lows, real-time open, pre-market highs, how they link it to these spots, okay, as being the, does that make sense? It really is pretty fascinating, but honestly, it works. So now let's set our conditions before you guys start saying, well, if we fail, no, failing 71.86 doesn't mean anything. Okay, failing 71.96 retest does, however, okay? That means something. This means absolutely nothing, just like 85 meant nothing. This doesn't mean anything, okay? 81 does, 80 does, 78 does, because it's calculated. There's a huge difference. So what conditions do we have to have now? And it's pretty obvious. Look at where they're holding. So far, we're sustaining above weekly opening ranges, or high ranges, sorry. Weekly highs is 8.3. Okay, that would be my first condition. That makes total sense that you'd want to hold your weekly highs to make new highs, obviously, duh. What would your next condition be? Clearly, you have to take out this 9.6 block. That seems to be the overhead. From a zone perspective, you guys, I sometimes break zones up into micro increments. Zones are usually 12 to 13 points. To kind of give an odd of what leans more bearish or bullish, you can do micro points of 5.5 to 6 points. Bear neutral zone. And sorry, this, I don't know why I did this in the opposite. Hold on. Okay, like that. Bear neutral zone is roughly around 9.596. So it's still bearish, but it starts to neutralize. Does that make sense? It's kind of like this. And sometimes I shade them orange, sometimes I don't. It just, for me, I already know what they are, but for other people that might not. Okay. Does that make sense? So kind of like from, where did I mark this from? From the 9.9 area basically to Yeah, roughly here, okay? I mean, if you want to make it flat, you can just mark it here. But usually when you start coming above like 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, it starts to neutralize a little bit. So that's where they kept stalling there. Did you guys see that? In here? These were bare neutral stalls. So where it's coming back and back testing right now, that's obviously putting it at some risk. Okay? Does that make sense? I'm really trying to break this down for you guys in like a way that everyone can understand it. And I am taking away from my own positions doing this. Like I don't have to be doing this in real time, but a lot of people get trapped in breaks like this, and then they start chasing highs, and they don't even understand what their rate. They don't even know what their odds are. They don't even know what ranges they could hit. They don't even know what they're targeting. Okay, I know that these are the max ranges. I know with certainty that the market cannot do anything more than this. Okay, based on what we looked at, is 71.96 enough to be considered a max range for the session today if the market doesn't want to go any higher? Yes. Why could that be a max range? Because that's an offset from yesterday's open, right? Or close, right? The 71.3250 and 71.22, like that 10.5 to 7.5 points above highs, right? So above 71.81 is 9.1. Above 71.83, right, is what? 10.5 points. I'm going over this one more time. Above 71.83 is 71.9350. So that's another reason why you really want to take out 9.350. Above all-time highs of that 71.80. What was the all-time highs before, you guys? 71.85.50 plus 10.5 points is what? 71.96. Okay? So 71.96 is linked to yesterday's close. Write down the logic so that you know what it is. 71.96 is linked to 7132.50 close and 7185.50 highs. Okay? If you really, really want to get specific, it would make sense that, okay, maybe I didn't do this part, but you could take the 10.5 points, guys, and add it to those pre-market highs. I didn't do this part. I just did the max ranges, but that would be the 10.5 plus 7,189.50 is 7,200. Okay, so pre-market highs 7189.50 plus 10.5 point offset that we gained back. Okay, gained back. It's a gain. That's an offset. Equals 7,200. Okay, so what's your conditions? If and when you break 7,196, ideally you want to push to where? And it makes sense because that would be taking out that range. But even if you looked at this like as the difference between that range from here, you see like that 13.5, okay, to here or to here. Remember how we said that this could be like that 17-ish range, okay, to 13 range, 18 points in range, okay, especially if we look at using like these areas in here. Well, we're gonna just use 4.3 because that's what it is. But what's 17 plus 71.83? That's also that 7,200, 7,201, right? So that's where you can have your conditions. If you can come back and retest 719394, which is the first major overhead, you have to take out 7196 to what? 71.96 has to clear too. And you can use Bayes zone theory if you want, but the actual exactly 7,200. Okay? No, you guys, you don't go from 7196 to 7206. It's 7,200. Okay? That's your final interval. That's your lowest interval off pre-market highs. Okay? Basically off that final high, which I didn't calculate because that's kind of like the range in between, but technically you could, like the 7189.50 plus 7.5 points is 7197. Okay, this is 7.5 plus 7189.50. Okay, so 7197, 7200 is a pretty important spot, correct? If we did the 13.5 point ranges, 7189.5 plus that 13.5 point range, it's around 7203. So there's a lot of confluence around 7203, 04. That's fine. But I need to know where that overhead sits. Okay? Where do we have the heaviest overhead until we get like a structured confined break based on where they stalled here in pre-market? That's your 7.5 points. Do you see it? This is your 10. 10.5. Okay? Does that make sense, you guys? Okay, now let's make it more fun. Let's time the exact time they're gonna do it. Let's see. When do they have the highest odds of doing this, you guys think? They broke range this morning close to 7:30, 7:31. Maybe look at a 90-minute, 81-minute. I don't know what odds we have, but there's probably some flags there. 1:30. Okay, these are some of the earliest windows for breaking those ranges. 1:30. $2.15. Maybe we could look at the mid interval. What's the midpoint between 1:30 and 2:15? So we probably had some conditions here that they have to hold. That's pretty funny that that's when they retested those pre-market. That's crazy. 1:30 was the retest of the pre-market, or the weekly highs, sorry. That's pretty insane. Okay, so 152. Okay, so then that's probably the earliest odd, is probably around this 152 to 154 window. What condition do you think has to be met at that time? Which would make complete sense. This is extremely advanced style of trading, guys. I don't expect you guys to do this, by the way. I'm just showing you, okay? I'm not telling you that you have to trade like this. I want to show you guys how this could work out, okay? Where do you have to hold, you think, at that time of day? Obviously here. Like, you have to try holding above that 71.8950 because that's what you're calculating off of, right? Yes? Kind of like here. If you want to come back to these highs, this weekly high, I'm going to start writing things. This was the weekly high, okay? Above 7183, okay? This was prior weekly high before taking out 7183. Okay. From a logic perspective, can you take out the weekly high, which is this now, without sustaining that prior week high? Probably not. Okay, that's your first condition. The timing aspect was 130, 131. Okay, before 152.54 roughly, you want to try to sustain above 8.9 at this point. Okay, I don't have the 9.3 spots marked, but like these are like the mid points in here marked, but these spots are obviously important. So then what are your conditions now? What do you want to do during this 154 to 215 period? if you want to make new highs, okay? And the extension of highs on this, the first area is 9.7, the second area is 7,200. Yeah, you need to clear minimum 9.4, but you have to get above this 9.6, 9.7. Because this minimum range is that 7.5, right? That's where they stalled. And this is how people get chopped up in premiums when we get high breaks like this. Isn't this pretty cool, you guys? I'm gonna take a little break from talking because I'm tired, but I want to look at my positions. But I hope this really helps. Like, this should help you guys understand ranges, okay, and odds and probability, and how open close is directly correlated to your highs and lows. So 7197 is also the calculated range, you guys, off of, not only off of all-time highs, this is also, 7197 is also the minimum extension of 7189 to 50 pre-market highs. So that's pretty cool, okay? The market definitely does not owe us above this if it doesn't want to. Okay, so there's different scenarios that they could do here. If they clear on time here, okay, they could make this a break to the 7200s, like 01, 03, 08, whatever. If they don't want to break above 9.7 or the 7200 mark, they could just make this pinnable around 7188, 89, 90, 93, 95. Does that make sense, you guys? They could just pin our max weekly ranges. Ideally, we'd want to pin in the zone if that's the case. Like, I would much rather pin in here since we already made it here. What do you guys think? Let's do a poll. Max range for the session. Highs are in 7197. 7197 to 7200 stalls. 7201 to 7204. 7205 to 7207. 7208 to 7212. I'll set that to 10 minutes so that you guys have some time to vote on that. Those on YouTube, just, I guess, send me your answer in the chat. And then from there, we can do a final end of day poll for pinning the close. I tried really hard this week, you guys, to make sure that everyone understands, like, the odds, scenarios, what's playing out. It's not an easy thing to teach. And then sometimes people are like, well, this is too complicated. Well, no shit. I wouldn't expect it to be easy to predict the open and close or the highs. You know what I mean? Or the lows, or like the areas that have to trigger. Like, of course it's going to be complicated. And the times that we're going to do it. Like, that's not supposed to be something that's easy. 154 retesting the 7193. These are part of the conditions to see if they can keep pushing through that 215 period. 7194 being triggered. That was the minimum spot that I had said at exactly that time of day. I ended up closing my chart by accident. Shit. Where did it go? 7194 triggered. Look at that. Oh my god, you guys. Holy shit. They actually took it to 7,200 on that stick. That is insane. That is crazy. My chart went off. That is nuts. You guys saw that, right? We just pre-calculated that time too. That is wild. Someone asked me yesterday, but what if you get a tweet? I'm like, it doesn't matter. That's already timed and factored in. Like this is an example of that. That's crazy. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. That's right on the calculated time. And those were the spots. That's crazy, you guys. That is insane. Yeah, because I was like, oh, 94 could trigger this. When my chart closed, there was only like 30 seconds left. So I was like, oh, can they actually push that to here? That's crazy. Do you guys see that? Holy shit. I guess we could get 7208. We have to see what kind of follow through they get here. That's insane. Look at that. You guys, that's crazy. That's the 10.5 point break. Or if you look at it off that 8.550, okay? And that 8.3 hold, this right here, that's that 18 to 17 point break that I was just telling you guys about from this calculator. Look at that. That's crazy. You guys, that's the 18 point break. Right at that 70, 197, 7,200, 7,201. That was the overhead. That's crazy. What does that mean? Do you guys see this? 8.3 and that 18. 7,201 is that overhead off the prior weekly high. It already took out. Yeah, okay, this is a good example, you guys. Okay, this is really gonna fuck with your heads a bit, but listen closely, okay? Remember how I said sometimes you don't have to technically go higher to get higher? It's relative to which calculated area it's linked to. So 18 points off 7183 is 7201, okay? Yes. 7183 is previous high, correct? For the week. Okay? But they already took out the 10.5 minimum range, okay, off the new high of 7189, which is the 232 point interval. Okay? Does that make sense? And this area here is 7,200. So technically, all you have to actually take out is 7,200. Does that make sense? It's a really weird way of looking at things, but it's kind of like which area holds a higher, like a higher weight? Does that make sense? And like the minimum calculation. So, and if that is lower than a high, like a lower weighted ratio, this is going to sound crazy, okay? Then the odds are higher that you could take it out without necessarily breaking that range. Does that make sense? It's just that when you do, so when you come back and retest 7,200, you have to take out 7,201. Does that make sense? Yeah, exactly. And so, and this is off the minimum range, okay? Off the pre-market highs, because technically this is our new high, right? And so, like this was the new weekly high technically that occurred. So from there, that's where you could apply like that 13, okay, point range. This is where you're going to get that. And then same thing, that 18, which is around that 06, 07. Do you see that? And then it's the same thing. If you applied the 22 point range off the 8.3, it was, what was it, 22.75 or something? You'll get around 72.0575. I don't know, that's wild. And the fact that they did it at our calculated time is even crazier. Okay? Okay, let's Let's keep going, you guys. What's the midpoints then here from that 215 to 154? This is probably important too. So 21 minutes from here, around like 10 and a half. We probably have some odds, you guys, around 204, 205, 203, this window here. I usually always watch the 207, 208, 210 period, so we're going to watch that anyway, but this is the 75% time interval, okay? At these times of day, this is a calculated time, you guys, to making new highs. Isn't that insane? And people ask me, like, calculated time of day for highs. And that was the calculated high off open close and pre-market high. When you start looking at the market this way, you won't look at it any other way. That's why sometimes when I see what people post, I laugh. I'm not laughing at them, I'm just laughing because they don't really understand what's actually happening in the background. What was the one issue here though? There is something, so they did test it. But what did they not do? We still haven't gotten this yet, and we won't get any constructive price action until this happens. I could imagine that there could be some volatility in that case. What have they not done yet? There's no close over the 9.6, 9.7 area, okay? They did close over 9.4, which is like that mid-bear zone. Can you get clearance breaks once you close over 9.6, 9.7? Another thing you could look at too is maybe the differentials between here. So like you see the low right here versus how much they're holding right here above the 8-9 spot. Because back in here, even though they breached below, they still closed above 8-9.50, but they breached just slightly below. Maybe that 1.5 if they hold higher, okay, could net us the 1.5 close higher. Does that make sense? I'm gonna need to take Advil again today, I think. My head's killing me. We have like a severe weather storm right here right now. Like the wind is insane. I don't even know how fast that was going. That wind is crazy right now. Wind. Holy. Look at this, you guys. The wind outside is insane. How strong was it? I didn't actually see like how strong the wind actually was. Like, I think it was like 30 miles an hour in miles or something. I think it was worse than that. Holy shit, that's way higher than I thought. Do you guys read that? That's insane. How much is that in miles? What is 90 kilometers in miles? Like, I didn't sleep last night. 55 miles, you guys. That's how hard that wind was going. I swear, I thought my house was gonna break. It's still going right now. I can hear things like slamming outside. Well, we hit 7,200 on the week. These are the rough midpoints here around 204, 205. I usually watch this 207, 208 interval anyway, so I'm just going to mark them. I don't know if there are actually any flips today, but yeah. If they decide to reduce range during this period, let's say they keep it above 8.8 but beneath 9.4, okay? Could it start becoming very pinnable? Especially if our max ranges are potentially these areas here. Yes, okay. one would be the only case that they would expand. And from a zone theory, it makes sense. Okay, because if the 71, 12, 14 are our max ranges, obviously if you clear the neutral zone, you could expand to 22, 31, 26. Do you get what I'm saying? So it would make sense that that would be the case. Another way of looking at it too is, remember how I said that this is 232 points off our ratios right here? Or 132 points, sorry. Off the actual Friday opening range, like the 7, 7, 7, 8. These are now hitting like those core ranges. Do you see that? 106. This is why I was saying technically they could pin us around these areas here. Okay, like this is the 115. These are core to core pinned ratios at 9.2. Even though 9.2 is a bear zone, it's a core ratio. Okay, so just something to factor in. This is if they want to start making it pinnable. Okay, off 7, 7, 7, 8. And another way of looking at that is if they extend range, okay, then obviously they'd have to move the 128 points. Okay, and 132. These are also aligned off the 7, 8. Does that make sense? So I know that there's confluence from here off here where we currently are, but there also is confluence off here. Off our weekly lows, the 128 points is also the 72.08. Do you guys think that that's a coincidence? That 128 points or so is roughly the 72.07.08, around 120. Usually we trigger 129.75, but I usually just say 128, 132, just FYI. But usually it's around 128.75. I've noticed that that's a more accurate area, but so probably like closer to here. Okay. And the 132 is the 71.11. Okay. So there's a lot of confluence there. Now do you guys see the bigger picture? Look at the bigger picture. Okay, 128, 132 point intervals is also these areas. I showed you on a micro basis based off lows, open, close differentials, but I'm showing you it on a wider scale, okay? What else could this be? Remember how I said off April 13th, if we hit 226 point ratios, okay, because that was technically the range between here and here, 72.07.08. I don't know how you guys didn't pay attention to this week. I streamed this on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And I went over this like 6 times. This is also in the report. This is in the report. And these charts that I drew are in the report. So you guys should have already, that's how I captured 72.06 anyway in 08, okay? So I wish you guys were paying closer attention to that. But that's how I would know. If they pushed it off the opening range, however, okay, so off here instead, that's how I know that they'd probably have like an expanded ratio. Or if you look at it from like weekly open, which I haven't done yet, this is now like an 88. Do you see that? From a weekly opening range, these are also core ratios. 107, 110 off weekly open. Okay. When would you expand? When would this be considered an expansion? Obviously above the neutral zone. I just showed you guys 5 different ways why 72.06.08.10 is calculated. When would this expand? And this is why these are the max ratios for the week on an expansion scenario, which I don't know if we have high odds of this happening based on how much time we have left, but it all depends on how, if they give us sticks, obviously like that 7200 stick, then okay, yeah, maybe they could do that. But what would be our max ranges for the week? Do you see it? So usually around 129.75 is calculated. That's why, okay, so this area here. Do you see it? Do you see why those 30s could be the max ranges and the 20s? Is that off an expansion scenario? Off weekly open? Yes, okay. Everyone's on the same page? It's the top of zone, okay? Clearing neutral zone, 72.14 usually gives you those breaks anyway. $115 would be max core ratio off weekly open. There's some confluence around 72.17-ish. Remember what I said earlier in the week? How there was a weird ratio around 117-ish points. I don't remember if it was, I'm trying to remember what it was from. Was it, what was it from? Not this. Oh, this. From the low range off our 70.46 to the close, okay? This is very strange, but off weekly close and that prior low, if I did the same ratio off the weekly opening range to end of week, that is around that 72.20, okay? So that would be the scenario if they wanted to ramp us into the bull zone and then pin core. I don't think we have very high odds of that because of where we open the week and where we open the session. Had we opened the session at like 7.1, 7.6, 7.4, 7.8, were the odds high for a core to core break? Yes, they were, right? But technically we could still get core to core because we held core this week. So 70, 79, that's a core hold, okay? These are core ratios off that core hold. The 7188, 89, 90. Do you see this? The only issue is the 128, 132 are still within those neutral ranges, but oh, it is quite a lot to look at, but it's insane how it all played out. Sorry, guys, I don't have every screen open, so I keep forgetting about the YouTube screen. What's your signal for invalidation of a move? Like, in general, or what are you talking about? About this in specific? I only have runners that I'm scaling at this point. But usually it's time-based. Opening above, closing above. So I would say that this move gets invalidated if we can't come and open above, close above these ranges in here. That 9.6, 9.7. In terms of time, I mean, ideally we want it to be above there by the 2.15, 2.16. So I would say if they can't get above there by that point in time, you want to at least try to hold this 8.8, 8.9 during that period. Does that make sense? Because like holding here doesn't completely invalidate it. It could just delay it. So, and in terms of like delays or something like that, then you could maybe look at like some extensions on here, which I was away from my desk, unfortunately, so I didn't really have like the full advantage of looking at that. But some odds were pretty late today for like after the bell at like 4:30, 4:15, if they wanted to kind of stall here and then move it in the after hours. But there were some odds around like 3:30, 3:36, so that could just be like a extended duration. Does that make sense? So far, none of this is invalidated though. The structure today is actually perfect. From our calculated price points, like this 7.7, 7.6, 7.4, 7.1, this is perfect price action. This hold of 8.3 is perfect price action. This break right here of 9.4 to 9, this is, the only fault right here was not closing above 9.6. Had they closed above 9.6, like right here, okay, sorry, I know this is kind of hard to see. Had they closed above 9.6 right here, can you see this? This right here. Okay, we probably would have gotten a push to like that 7,200 spot again. And you could basically use like this intervals. Usually when they start doing my micro zones, remember how I said zones are around 13 points, 6.5 points? Once they clear 6.5 points, then they could start breaking the zone. Does that make sense? That's where I know that they could take it back to these core areas. So there is some risk right here. But had they not broken down, they would have probably been nesting around the 72.01 right now if they had closed above too. So we'll see what happens here. I think 215.16 is pretty important. 215, I want to see if they can hold that 71.89.50 pre-market high. And you can see the reduction off the 205 stick too, because that was the midpoint, right? 3.5 points. Okay, had they broke that 3.5 points higher, you wouldn't have closed above 9.6, but you would have probably gotten back to the 9.5. And then you see like the move after that, it was kind of a wasted move because of the range recycled down. Does that make sense? So like then you could have had this. Does that make sense? Like during this period, had they, you have to understand that like nothing that happens is ever a coincidence. Okay, so had they not broken down right here and instead they retracted up at 205, you see this follow through 206, 07, 08, you would have been back at 7,200. Does that make sense? I'm showing you like how the range could have played out. You could, and then you could take, I guess, the range difference from here, like until this period here. So roughly 4.5 points to 3.5 points. You could have been maybe trading within this range here at that point. So maybe just above 9.5, 9.6. Do you see that? So this is how your price, I'm going to draw it for you so you guys can see. Had they broke up right here at this point, they would have stalled right here. The candle would have looked like this. Okay. They could have taken it back up to here. Stalled. Probably done something like this. $71.89 close at that 214, 215 implies delays. Technically that's still valid even though there's a reduction immediately after, because they closed above the 8.950. But again, like I said, coming back beneath 8.8 is going to make it so that they likely start trading within these ranges here. We'll see if they can try to sustain. Okay, I'm going to end the stream, you guys, and focus on my positions. I'm going to maybe if I see better movement, but I feel like you guys should have a pretty good handle on this. Like, you guys know the ranges. You guys have a pretty good idea on what the scenarios are. Like, obviously, if we can't close above 9.5, 9.6, they could just make this pinnable in this range in here. They could reset last week's close, which was around 6.4. We would obviously want at least 6.7, 6.8. Closing in the zone is the best case scenario, but if they really want to make this pinnable and not, basically not break us to the 08 areas, let's say. Okay, let's just go with 7.5 points because that's the easiest from here. And that's been our range off the week. So what they could end up doing if they can't get back above 9.2 is basically, okay, take us back to here. Do you see that? Like beneath that 81, like around, you can do the same thing, but on the inverse. So instead of above highs, you can do it beneath highs. Does that make sense? So like your 7.5 to 10 points, 10.5 points, 13, etc. That's what would make it pinnable back at like 7.3, 8.1, potentially back to 70. So I would already know that if they break 7.1, then we'd be in trouble. And that makes sense because if you break 7.1, that's breaking core and it's breaking that 10.5 point interval. Does that make sense? And that would automatically push you to those 18, 20, 20 point ratios. That's what would make it pinnable into the close back at weekly range. Does that help you guys understand this? I hope that makes sense. I'm trying my best to explain it. So 7.5 points is around these areas, okay? Here, somewhere here, okay? Like 8.1. That would mean that you probably still have some odds of at least holding 7.3, 7.4, which the validated bull break is the 74, 76. Do you get what I'm saying? So technically you could afford that risk. What you can't afford is coming back beneath 7.1, okay? You come back beneath 7.1, this is where risk starts to increase. Does that make sense? That's where you can start seeing 18-point breaks, okay, 20.75 point breaks, Okay. 22.75 I think is right around this 5758 or something. And that makes sense because that would be the pinned into the weak scenario. Okay, and specifically off like the 8.1, 8.3, okay, off these weekly prior high ranges. Okay, and off 8.550. What is that? 6.3. Are you guys, do you understand that? So you could do the exact same thing on the inverse if you stall these areas here, which so far they're stalling, okay? And that's what would make it your scenario of either getting back to weekly pin, so basically back to here. Does that make sense? And try to reset your weekly close. That would basically make it doji, I think. Right? Or if you hold the 7.1, 7.4, 7.6, then you still have an odd of maybe not expanding upside, but you'd have an odd of at least pinning, getting a progressive pin. Does that make sense? Your progressive pin would be in this range in here. So in here. 7.7, 7.4, 8.1, okay? If you avoid going back beneath, let's say 7.8, 8.1, okay? Then you have an odd of pinning in the zone around 8.8, 8.9, 9.1, 9.3. Those are the only scenarios. There's nothing, I'm like certain that there's nothing else that they could do other than these three scenarios. Okay, so that's your weekly reset. This is your bull zone pin. Okay. The worst case would be to take it back to 4.4, I guess. Okay, good luck this afternoon, guys. I'm going to focus on my stuff, but watch Mark 336. Mark 336, and I don't think there was anything else, unless I missed something. Everything else was pretty late. Maybe look to see what the midpoint is between our high range, like here at 54, and end of day, and the 336. So 102, and the midpoint of that would be like 51. So mark down 2:45 p.m. and then preset your conditions of like what you'd want to occur during that period. And then from here till close is 126. So you could maybe look at like 112 to 13 points, or not 100, sorry, like 50. You could, should I do this till session close or real-time close? Probably real-time, so that you have your real-time odds. And then just preset the median point. So you could probably look at like close to like 62, 63, okay? Like in here. That's probably, they're probably just before 3 o'clock. Yeah, they are. Okay, this window here. So very important times of day to kind of watch for this afternoon, I would say, are this 2:45 window, 2:56, 57, just before 3. I always watch the 2:48, 2:50, so I mean you guys could too. And our 2:30 periods, like these are likely the midpoints between that 2:15, which I didn't measure, but you can. So between 2:15 and 2:36 is 81 minutes, so you can work in like 39 to 40 minute intervals. They're probably close to, yeah, they are. They're right around this 5.4. So clearly the 2:54 to 2:56 is an important period, okay? And then from here till end of session is probably going to be the same, like the 52 minutes is just after 3. And then if we look at the midpoint between the calculated range and 216, so like between 250, 257, okay, it's roughly 20 minutes. So you probably want to start seeing some sort of progression around the 235, 36 intervals. Does that make sense? And the 245. So 30 minutes, the earliest would be off the 15-minute interval. So 230, like I was saying. So those are like 25% ranges. If you want to measure off the actual 154 calculated time and these points here, then I think it's probably close to now, because these are like roughly 62 to 64 minutes. So you could look at like 31, 32 minutes. Do you see this? So these are probably important times of day to see if they can at least hold the line. Okay. Are you guys with me still? I know this is advanced, but so you probably need to try holding the zone at these times. Okay? Between here and here, 73 is around the 36-minute mark, so that's probably right before 230. So I would say that the conditions are pretty clear. You probably have to hold the line and get into the zone around 225, and then you have some early odds of retesting as early as 230, 236. Okay? Do you guys want these times so that you guys have them marked? At least, let me just delete this so you guys can see. You guys can preset your conditions. Obviously, the most important times are between the 254 to 258 period. And then right in here. And then you can manually calculate this if you want. Like this, between the 07 and 50, you could for sure do some ranges between 36 and they're pretty much the 41, 21 point intervals. Okay, so you could go with 41 minutes between 36, so like 20, so like around 215, 315, sorry, 316. You could watch this interval here too. Okay, so this was really good timing on that part though. So zone re-entry at that 225 mark. Mark 307, mark 315, mark 336. Mark the 235, 236, 245, and then this, basically the last 5 minutes before 3. Conditions make sense. You probably want to get back in the zone here, which is what they're trying to do. You see that at 25? You probably need better clearance breaks out here, otherwise that's where they could start making this a recycled kind of session. Okay, good luck guys the last hour. If I feel like I see any major expansion into close or something, if I think they could take this to 70, I don't know, 7208, 14, maybe even like 20, then I'll pop on. But for now, I feel like the market is pretty much priced into the week. So